Get comfortable. Let your shoulders drop. Let your jaw unclench. You've been holding it tighter than you realized. Tonight I want to tell you about a man named Owen, and about the particular, quiet pain of being someone that people look straight through. This is a gentle story. Nothing sharp in it. Just the truth of what it means to be unseen, and what happens when one ordinary moment changes all of that. Owen Marsh was the kind of man who arrived early and left, without anyone noticing he'd gone. He was 43 years old. He worked in the records department of a mid-sized insurance company in Columbus, Ohio. A department housed in the basement of the building, below the lobby, below the parking structure entrance, in a corridor that smelled faintly of old paper, and the particular staleness of recycled air that has been recycled one too many times. His office, if you could call it that, it was really just a wide alcove with a door, had a single window at ground level that looked out at a concrete retaining wall and, in the summer, a narrow strip of sky above it. He had worked there for 11 years. In 11 years, 4 different company directors had given speeches at all staff meetings about the importance of every team, every department, every person in the organization. Owen had attended each of these speeches. His name had never appeared in one. He was not disliked. That would have required people to think about him. He was simply unregistered. The sort of person who exists in the peripheral vision of an office and is absorbed, after a while, into the furniture. He ate his lunch at his desk every day. A sandwich he made at home. Always the same. Turkey and mustard on wheat. A small bag of pretzels. And a thermos of tea that he brewed each morning before leaving his apartment. He ate slowly, reading whatever library book he was currently in the middle of, and he was almost always in the middle of something history, mostly, and biography. He liked reading about people who had done things. He had a cat named Walter, a grey tabby with one slightly bent ear, who greeted him every evening with the specific enthusiasm of an animal who has spent all day waiting for exactly this. Owen talked to Walter more than he talked to most people. Walter was an excellent listener. He had a sister in Pittsburgh he called every Sunday. He had a neighbor, Mrs. Petrov, 78 years old, whose groceries he carried up the stairs every Thursday without being asked, and without making anything of it. He had a vegetable garden in 3 containers on his small balcony. Tomatoes, basil, and 1 bell pepper plant that never produced more than 2 peppers, but that he tended with the same faithfulness as if it were producing abundantly. He was, in other words, a full person. A person with textures and habits and small, private joys. But none of that was visible to the people he passed in the hallway at work, who nodded at him without quite focusing, who learned his name, somewhere in the first month, and then let it drift to the very back of their minds, where it stayed, inert and uncalled upon. Owen had made a kind of peace with this, or he told himself he had, which is not exactly the same thing. The thing that changed happened on a Tuesday in October, which is the right month for quiet revelations, that cool, amber-lit time of year, when the world seems to slow down, just enough for something to get through. There was a new employee on the 4th floor. Her name was Simone Adler, mid-30s, hired to manage the communications team, the kind of person who walked into a room and redistributed the energy in it, without trying. She had close-cropped, natural hair and reading glasses. She wore pushed up on her forehead, more often than on her face, and a laugh that arrived suddenly and completely, like weather. Owen had no particular reason to know any of this. Their departments had no overlap. She worked 4 floors above him, in a corner office with 2 windows and a view of actual sky. They met in the elevator. Owen was carrying a banker's box of archived files to the 3rd floor storage room, one of his regular Wednesday tasks, though this week it was Tuesday because of a scheduling change. The elevator opened on the basement level, and he stepped in with the box, which was awkward and slightly heavier than he'd remembered. and which he was balancing against his chest with both arms and his chin. Simone was already in the elevator. She looked at the box and then at him, and without saying anything she reached over and pressed 3 for him, because his hands were obviously full. It was the smallest possible gesture. It cost her nothing. It took 2 seconds. Owen said, "Thank you." She said, "Of course." And that was it. The doors opened on 3. He carried the box out. The elevator closed behind him. But here is the thing. When he said thank you, she had looked at him. Not through him, not past him, at him. For 2 seconds, she had registered him as a full person, as someone whose difficulty with the elevator button was worth solving, as someone whose thanks deserved a response. He thought about it, walking back down the stairs to the basement. He thought about it at lunch. He thought about it that evening while Walter sat on the couch beside him, and he tried to explain why he felt strangely and inexplicably better than he had in weeks. "She just pressed the button," he told Walter. Walter blinked slowly. That's all it was. He didn't see her again for 2 weeks. And then one morning the coffee machine on his floor was broken. It was broken frequently. It was a very old machine with strong opinions about when it wanted to work, and someone had sent an email saying the 4th floor kitchen was available to all staff while maintenance sorted it out. Owen went upstairs with his thermos to ask if he could use the hot water tap. The 4th floor kitchen was a different world from his corridor. Bright, with a long counter and a real espresso machine and a bowl of apples that someone replenished, apparently by magic. There were people talking, laughing, a morning energy that felt foreign to him. Simone was at the counter. She looked up when he came in, and this is the part that undid him a little. She said, "Elevator box guy. How are the archives?" She had remembered him. Not his name, but his context. His specific moment. His box. Out of everyone she had been in elevators with and hallways and meetings, she had kept a small piece of him somewhere accessible. He laughed, surprised out of it. A real laugh, unguarded. "Fully archived," he said. "I'm Simone," she said, and extended her hand. "Owen," he said. "Owen." She said it back the way people do when they're actually storing it. "Do you want coffee? This machine is genuinely excellent and I've been waiting for an excuse to make a second cup." He stayed for 20 minutes. He was 11 minutes late back to his desk, which had never happened in 11 years. He sat down in his alcove and looked at the concrete retaining wall outside his window and felt the warmth of having been, briefly, included in the world. What happened next happened slowly. The way real things happen. Simone started saying hello to him in the hallway. Not a vague, unfocused hello. A specific one, with his name attached. Owen. Sometimes with a brief exchange about nothing important, the weather, the broken coffee machine, a book she'd noticed him carrying once in the elevator. Small moments, 30 seconds each, easily forgettable. Owen did not forget them. He started, cautiously, extending himself slightly further. He responded to a company-wide email about a charity book drive that had been sitting in his inbox for a week, something he would normally have archived without acting on. He dropped off 2 boxes of books from home the next morning. He left them at the collection point on the 4th floor, and Simone saw him and said, "Owen, those are great." And the person at the desk beside the collection point, a man named Chris, who had worked there for 5 years and had never once spoken to. Owen looked up and said, "Oh hey, are you the one who donated those? We were hoping someone would bring in some history stuff." Owen said yes. Chris said he'd been meaning to read more history. Owen recommended 3 books. Chris wrote them down on a post-it. A post-it with 3 book titles in someone else's handwriting. It sounds so small, but Owen was 43 years old and had eaten lunch alone at his desk for 11 years, and something about that post-it The physical evidence that someone had found his knowledge worth writing down sat in his chest like warmth. He began to notice what he'd been doing, or rather what he'd stopped doing without noticing. He'd stopped suggesting things. Years ago, when he'd first joined the company, he'd occasionally sent notes to his manager with ideas, a more efficient filing system, a way to cross-reference two databases that kept duplicating effort. The ideas were good. Two of them had actually been implemented, quietly, without attribution. At some point he'd stopped sending the notes, without marking the moment he'd stopped, without acknowledging that what had stopped him was the gradual accumulation of being overlooked. He'd just gone quiet, pulled inward, made his world smaller until it was the right size for someone no one was listening to. He started sending notes again. The first one went to his direct manager, a tired man named Gerald, who read them quickly and sent back a response that said, "Interesting, we'll consider," and which Owen was fairly certain meant nothing. But the second one he sent to a slightly different email, the operations coordinator, a woman named Beth, who was known for actually reading things, and Beth responded the same afternoon with 3 questions and a meeting request. The meeting was the first time Owen had been in a conference room in 4 years. He sat at the long table and explained his idea, a new indexing system for the archived claims files that would cut retrieval time by roughly 60%. And Beth listened with her full attention, the way Simone had looked at him in the elevator, and 2 other people in the room took notes. And by the end of the meeting, someone had said the words Owen's system, as if that were a normal phrase, as if Owen were the kind of person whose name got attached to things. He walked back down to the basement afterward, and sat at his desk and thought, I have been here for 11 years. This idea has been in my head for 3. And I stopped myself from saying it because I had decided, quietly without meaning to, that I was not worth listening to. I want to pause here and ask you something, very gently, because I think you might know this feeling. Have you ever made yourself smaller because it felt safer than being overlooked? Have you ever swallowed an idea, or a word, or a version of yourself that was a little brighter, a little louder, a little more present, because somewhere along the way, you learned that offering those things led to nothing, and nothing felt worse than offering? If you have, then you know what Owen had been living in, and you know how quietly it happens. You don't decide to disappear. You just stop deciding to be seen. And the days add up, and the years add up, and one morning you realize the world has learned to look right through the space where you're standing. And then someone presses an elevator button, and something shifts. Owen's indexing system was implemented over the following quarter. His name appeared in the internal project notes. It appeared in a brief mention at an all-staff meeting. Just 2 sentences, but they contained the words Owen Marsh Records Department. And Owen sat in the back row of that meeting and felt the specific, complicated sensation of being named in a room. He and Simone had coffee once a month now, a standing informal thing, nothing organized, just 2 people who had fallen into a comfortable rhythm of conversation. She was smart and funny and had a way of asking questions that made him think about things from new angles. She had introduced him to Chris and to Beth, and to a few other people on floors he'd never visited. His world had gotten larger. He was not, suddenly, the most popular person in the building. He was not transformed. He still ate his sandwich at his desk most days. He still went home to Walter and his balcony, tomatoes and his Sunday calls to his sister. He was still Owen. Quiet, observant, a little formal, happiest with a book. But he had stopped making himself invisible. And the difference between those 2 things, being quiet and being invisible, turned out to be enormous. One evening in November, almost exactly a year after the elevator, he was carrying groceries up the stairs for Mrs. Petrov. It was a Thursday, same as always. She was telling him about her daughter in Arizona, which she did every week. Always slightly different details, always the same warmth. At her door, she turned and looked at him the way very old people sometimes look at you, fully, without hurry, as if they have earned the right to see you clearly. You seem different, she said. From last year. Owen thought about this. I think I stopped hiding, he said. She nodded slowly. Good, she said. You were always worth finding. He walked back down the stairs and stood in the small lobby of the building for a moment. In the November dark, the street light, coming through the glass door in a long yellow rectangle across the tile floor. He thought about the elevator. About 2 seconds and a button pressed. About how the smallest acknowledgement, given freely and without thinking, had worked its way into him like a seed. About how he had done the rest. The notes, the meetings, the gradual, careful expansion back into his own life. He had been there all along. He had just needed one person to see it first, so that he could remember it himself. Let the night hold you now. Let the thinking quiet down. If you have been moving through your days feeling like you exist, just outside the frame, unseen, unheard, present but not registered, I want you to know, that is not the truth of what you are. It is only the truth of what others have not yet found. And it takes so little. A conversation, a note sent, a question answered, a book recommended to someone who writes the title down. You are not invisible. You are just waiting for the right elevator. And sometimes you don't have to wait. Sometimes you can press your own button. Step into the room. Say the thing you've been holding. Let someone write your name on a post-it. The world has a place for you that is exactly your size. Not smaller. Sleep now. You've done enough for today. Good night, Owen. Good night to all the Owens listening. You are always worth finding.